How's it going, YouTube? Rambo to Base here. I'm just bringing you another quick Tyranid Tactica video, and this one is specifically to do with Synapse control. So let's get straight into it, shall we? I've laid an example out here on the table of my first setup for a Tyranid army, and this is a setup that I like to call the Synapse net, or the synaptic web. The basic idea of this is you have every other unit is a Synapse creature. So in this example I've got a Tervigon, Gaunts, Zoanthrope, Hormagaunts, Hive Tyrant, Hormagaunts, Zoanthrope, Gaunts and a Tervigon. So it's basically just mirror image of the same army. Now this is quite a good setup for your Tyranids, although you might get into some problems with being assaulted on one flank and your other flank being too far away. Another problem that you might come into with this army is if you're playing somebody that routinely plays Tyranids a lot or knows a lot about the army, they will kind of systematically start picking off your Synapse creatures, and you might find that your army just starts falling apart. But on the whole, it's quite a good quite a good setup. The only problem is obviously because this board is open, there's no terrain. You've got to take the terrain into account when you're playing an actual game, but I've just done this just for an example. This army is just an example as well. I haven't worked out any points or anything. I've just thrown some models on the board. One good thing about this list is that if you do get assaulted on one side, you've always got a unit next to the unit that's been assaulted or attacked or whatever to counter-attack with. But because you've spread your army so thin, you're always going to have some of your army on the other side of the board, and that's really what this video is about. Really, is that I find that when you split your Tyranids up and start running them in thin lines or having them all over the board, they don't work as effectively as they do when they're in just a huge blob. But we'll get to that in a bit. Another good thing about this setup is that as you're moving forward, because you've got the Tervigons on the flanks, they can keep spawning every turn, hopefully, and then the units that are produced can either run off to objectives and hopefully hold them, or hold back and hold objectives, or your entire army can run forward in a huge pincer maneuver, just envelop whatever's coming at you, hopefully. That's the theory anyway. I know in actual practice, in gameplay, it doesn't always work that well, but it's good to start off with some sort of basic idea of what you're going to do with your army. Otherwise you're just playing blind, really, aren't you? So this is my first setup anyway. This is called the synaptic web, or the Synapse net. Okay, so my next setup here is very similar to the last one. It takes lines into consideration, but I call this the front rank, second rank Synapse, or double line Synapse. And the basic idea of this is you've still got the same range of Synapse control, but it's more enclosed now, so it's a bit more protected than the straight line technique. But you send the front rank off as like your meat shield, if you like. In this example I've got mainly Gaunts here, two big units of Gaunts, and then I would send the Hive Tyrant off with them as well, with the two guard. And then the idea being that you keep all the Gaunts at the front of the Hive Tyrant, so they're taking all the shooting wounds, and then they're in the way to be assaulted as well. So if you do get assaulted, they're going into the Gaunts, and then they'll probably get wiped out. Then you can throw your Hive Tyrant in, and you've got two units of Hormagaunts just behind them, just to jump in as well. So two units of Hormagaunts and a Hive Tyrant with Hive Guard are going to rip anything to pieces, really, so you haven't actually got to worry about it. And then you've still got the Tervigons holding up the rear, keeping the Synapse range at the rear of the board, and also pumping out them extra Gaunts that you want during the game. Then the Zoanthropes, they're just there to, if your Hive Tyrant gets killed, you've still got your central Synapse control going on. This works quite well as well. I used this the other day to great effect. Managed to butcher an entire unit of Thunderwolves. They charged me, they went into the Gaunts as I predicted, and then my counter-attack just ripped them to pieces, basically. One point to remember, with this many Psykers on the board, if you roll on the Biomancer table and you get Endurance or Enfeeble, you can do some really horrible things with that. If you're passing them powers on your enemies, you're making them worse, or you're making your own guys better, so it's worth bearing the psychic powers in mind as well now, because I think they help Tyranids quite a lot. So this is my second example of a Tyranid setup. Again, you have to take the terrain into account when you're actually playing the game. The one downside to this is your front rank is definitely going to get wiped out pretty quickly, so you want to make sure it's cheap as chips. And again, if you get attacked from the side, one side, although your units are still relatively close, it might take you a turn to get there, so you've got to bear that in mind as well if you've got any kind of really fast outflanking units in the army you're facing. So yeah, this is setup number 2. Okay, so here's my third setup for your Tyranid army, and this is the setup that I like to call Synapse free, or full Synapse, free range Synapse, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure you've guessed already, the idea of this is that basically nothing in your army needs Synapse control. There would be, because there's two Tervigons, obviously they're going to spawn and them units might need Synapse, but them are the sort of units you're just going to leave lurking around anyway. If I take you through the list quickly here, like I said, I haven't added up points or anything, I'm just going to tell you what the units are. So we've got two big units of Gaunts, and there's 30 Gaunts in each of them, and they're led by a Prime Warrior. And I've done that a few times just because it gives the Gaunts the flexibility of not having to worry about the Synapse because they're with the Synapse creature. So you just run them off wherever you want, but I do find they work better if you leave them together so they can multi-assault and whatnot. So the Tervigons then also count as troops because of the big units of Gaunts. You can make them troops, and monstrous creature troops. Sweet, you want to be doing that. Two other units of troops that I've taken. There's two units of 5 warriors there. Again, Synapse free, so they're just wandering off doing what they want. And then you've got the Zoanthropes in the middle, which are, your tank support, your anti-tank support or whatever, and then 2 units of Ymargal Stealers, and I love using them just because they pop up and kill things and they're pretty useful models. Downsides to this list would be, because of challenges now, you could have your Tyranid Prime caught in a challenge and get his head cut off, and then that unit's just going to go crazy. And other things that I don't like is some of the units are a bit expensive. Say for instance, if you were taking the warriors, as they are, warriors are, if you're going to kit them out nicely, they are quite expensive. You're talking like 250 points plus for 5 of them, which is quite a lot of points to spend on something that can be instant killed with a crack rocket. Yeah, and the only thing that I really like about this list is just the fact that, like I said, you don't have to really worry about the Synapse control. I never generally use this kind of list. I do use the warriors with the big units of Gaunts, but I've never used a completely Synapse-free army, just because, there are units in there that I like using that haven't got Synapse. So yeah, this is my third setup, and there's not much else I can say about it, really. Okay folks, so here's my sort of 4th idea for a Tyranid setup. This is like a deep striking list. Obviously with the rules now you can't deep strike your entire army, which would be still quite fun if you could do that. But you can't. So the idea behind this army is basically you have quite a large force that you're sending forward, which is a heavy force basically. So here I've got 3 Trigons, I've got the 2 big units of Gaunts again, and I've got the Primes with them, and then also a couple of Tervigons, and you're just going to munch that stuff up the board, and people are going to have to deal with it because otherwise they're going to get eaten by all these monsters coming at them. And then I've left all these other units out because basically you can take your pick from which ones you like the look of the most. There's the Morlock. He's quite interesting, it's a fun way to play, but I only ever really use him in big games. But obviously he deep strikes, so he pops up somewhere and he takes out a weapons team at the back, or somebody sitting on an objective and blah blah blah. Then you've got the Ymargal Gene Stealers again. They arrive in, not by deep strike exactly, but from reserve. And again, they're a really useful model in the game these days, I find. And then you've got your drop spores. I made these drop spores myself out of a bit of expanding foam and just glued them to some wood, because obviously Games Workshop haven't took their thumb out of their arse for the last 4 years and made the models for them yet. And then I would pop them down, and then you've got a choice of units that you can bring out of them, really. You've got the the scythed Carnifex, the standard Carnifex, which is going to hurt something if it gets there, but with 4 wounds it's probably not. By far probably the better choice if you're going to take a Carnifex is the Carnifex with 2 sets of Twin Link Devourers, because you're getting quite a lot of shots off with that. And it's quite strong, so if you get a rear armour of a tank or a dreadnought, you can usually blow it up. And combined with a Flying Hive Tyrant, these guys can work really well. And then thirdly, you've just got your standard Zoanthropes, drop them in and blow up a tank or something. Downsides with this list, again, you're splitting your forces, so you've got half your force running up the board and then the rest of it arriving in reserve, which could happen in drips and drabs, or it could all happen at once. I suppose now the reserve rolls are slightly different, you're more likely to have them arrive all at once, but who knows, could take 2 turns, couldn't it? So yeah, this is my fourth setup for Tyranids, and I've used this a few times, but to be honest, it's not my favourite setup. Okay, so last but not least, this is probably my favourite overall Tyranid setup. This is what I like to call the Tyranid bubble, or the blob, or I suppose you could call it the swarm, but that sort of means something else, doesn't it? The basic idea of this is you have all of like your important monsters and Synapse creatures and stuff in the middle, all the stuff that you don't really want to get killed very quickly, and then you just surround them with everything else. You have all the little guys and whatever else you've got all surrounding them, and it works so well, this tactic does, because no matter which way you get assaulted from, your enemy's always got the crap units to go into first, and if you're really clever with it and you space them out during the game and you make sure that they're like sort of 12 inches away from your main guys, then even like melter guns and stuff can't get in, so it's only really the long range weapons you've got to worry about. And this specific technique is such a fluid way of playing as well, because have you seen the Starship Troopers film when all the aliens come running around on that little outpost and it's just like a sea of living monsters? That's kind of what this setup reminds me of. Everything's together, big guys next to little guys just running, and the best thing about it is the flexibility to move with this type of setup, because again, no matter which way you get assaulted from, you can throw your entire army into whatever comes at you, and it's right there to help as well. Everything's benefiting from Synapse range. Even if you only lose a couple of creatures, you're still going to have Synapse range on something. And like I said, this is just in my mind, this is the standard technique for running a Tyranid army. Whack them all as close together as you can. You know, even if you've got blast templates coming at you, who cares? The little monsters, let them get killed. It's a really solid way of fighting with your army. This is probably my favourite setup. Right folks, there you go. That's my quick run through of some of my favourite ways of setting up your Tyranid army at the start of the game, just to ensure that your Synapse control is going to be as effective as it can, at least for the first half of the game anyway. It's important to remember that the units that I've taken, I'm not necessarily suggesting which units you should take. It's more about the actual setup, you know, the outlay of the army. So, I mean, if you run different units that you find work better for you, Trigon Primes and stuff like that, feel free to use them, but also feel free to use my techniques of setting up. And if you have completely different ideas of how to set your army up and you think that everything I've just said is a load of bullshit, then that's fine as well. You know, it's just a matter of opinion, isn't it really, folks? So I hope that you found this video interesting, and I'll try and get another one up soon. Until then, take it easy. And it's also important to remember, if anybody ever pisses you off during a game, what you can do is just bring one of these bad boys along with you and then just start systematically blowing their models off the table. And if anybody's got a problem with it, shoot them in the face.